It happened so fast I barely had time to think. One second I was sipping coffee in my kitchen, the next I heard the sickening crunch of metal and wood tearing apart outside. When I ran to the porch, my mailbox was lying in pieces, my tulips flattened like a crime scene, and a white SUV was speeding away with two women laughing inside as if it was the best joke they'd ever pulled. That was the third time in 2 months. Third. And in that moment, staring at the ruins, I knew this wasn't just a neighborly dispute anymore. This was war. When Nancy and Barbara moved into the neighborhood 6 months earlier, the atmosphere changed overnight. They were identical twins in their 40s, loud enough to wake the dead, always wearing cheap floral dresses that looked like tablecloths from a bad diner. They smelled like a mix of melted cherries and sunscreen, and somehow their voices carried across every yard like megaphones. They called their lifted white Escalade the Queen Barge and treated it like royalty, except they drove it like a wrecking ball. My mailbox became their favorite target. The first time I told myself it was an accident. The second time I confronted Barbara. She just smirked, sipped her Diet Coke, and said, "Maybe don't put it so close to the road." I told her, "That's where mailboxes go," but she chirped back, "Ugly things are hard to see." That smug little smile burned into my brain. They weren't sorry, not even close. And it wasn't just my mailbox. They parked across driveways, blocked trash pickups, blasted music until 2 in the morning, and when anyone complained, they turned it into a circus. They even called the HOA on my 80-year-old neighbor for daring to ask them to turn the volume down. So I did what any rational person would do. I went to the HOA. Their response, "We'll look into it." They never did. I filed a police report, but the officer shrugged and said, unless I had proof they were doing it intentionally, it was a civil matter. Meanwhile, my property looked like it had been mauled by a bear. That's when I installed a camera, a good one, and sure enough, it didn't take long. At 7:13 one morning, Nancy lined up the Queen Barge like she was playing Grand Theft Auto and plowed straight into my mailbox. Splinters flew. Barbara howled with laughter, and they didn't even slow down. I had it all on video. I marched back to the HOA with the footage, and they had the nerve to tell me they prefer neighbors to resolve disputes on their own. I showed the cops two same response. Could be an accident with them laughing on camera. The next day, I confronted them directly. They were unloading groceries, arms full of frozen dinners. I held up a printed still from the video. "You want to explain this?" Nancy barely glanced at it. "Photoshop. It's a video I snapped." Barbara didn't even look up, just muttered, "Deep fake." I told them, "You're targeting my property." Nancy stepped close enough that I could smell the peanut butter crackers on her breath. "You put your mailbox too close to the street. You're begging for someone to hit it." Barbara chimed in, "Or maybe you're trying to scam us for insurance money." The smugness was suffocating. They'd turned the whole thing into a game, and I was losing. That night, sitting in my garage, staring at the mangled pile of wood, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't even angry anymore, just tired. Tired of fixing, tired of filing complaints no one cared about, tired of feeling like prey. For a moment, I actually thought about giving up. Let them win. Maybe I was the fool here, expecting fairness where there was none. But then I thought about the way Barbara had smirked at me, the way Nancy leaned in like she owned the whole damn street. No, I wasn't done. If no one else was going to stop them, I'd have to build something they couldn't laugh off. So I built a trap. Not illegal, not dangerous, just indestructible. A 4-inch steel post buried in 200 pounds of concrete reinforced with rebar, welded shut. On the outside, it looked like any ordinary black mailbox, shiny chrome flag and all. But underneath it was a fortress, a wolf in sheep's clothing. I poured the concrete at midnight under the moonlight, sweat dripping down my back, and when it was finally done, I actually smiled for the first time in weeks. A few days later, the Karen spotted it. Barbara squinted across the street. He put up another one. Nancy shielded her eyes and laughed. "Ugh, hideous. Think it'll last a week?" Barbara chuckled. "Try an hour." I stayed inside sipping coffee, pretending not to watch heart pounding. The trap was set. And then came the morning I'll never forget. 6:42 a.m. The growl of an engine ripped through the silence. Tires squealed. I dropped the kettle and sprinted to the window just in time to see the Queen barge flying straight at my mailbox like a missile. Nancy hunched over the wheel, Barbara filming with her phone. The impact was violent metal against steel. Their bumper crumpled like paper, the hood folded, the radiator hissed, and the front tire exploded with a bang. The SUV screeched to a halt, dead in the middle of my lawn. Nancy stumbled out her daisy print dress, torn mascara running, screaming that I had sabotaged them. Barbara limped after her, clutching her phone. I stepped outside, calmly recording with mine. "You mean I put a mailbox on my own property?" I asked. Barbara shrieked. "You can't make it out of metal, that's illegal." I smirked. "Actually, it's city approved. Want to see the permits?" When the police arrived, same officer who once told me it was a civil matter, he took one look at the wrecked SUV, then at my perfectly intact mailbox and said, "Mailboxes have to withstand accidents. This one's legal. You drove onto his lawn." Nancy tried to argue, but her words came out like air escaping a balloon. Barbara demanded I be arrested for making them look stupid. The officer actually laughed. And then things got worse for them. Their insurance company denied the claim. $7,000 in damages, all on their dime. I uploaded my footage online, and it went viral overnight. Karen twins versus Mailbox boss had 500,000 views in a day. Memes, remixes, the whole 9 yards. Nancy's company saw it and suspended her for conduct unbecoming. Barbara, who didn't work, resorted to pacing on her porch, throwing trash into my yard, smearing barbecue sauce on my mailbox at night like some deranged raccoon. My cameras caught every second, and I uploaded every second. But here's the truth. Even when I was winning, I didn't feel like it. There was one night I sat on my porch exhausted, wondering if I had become obsessed, if I was letting them drag me down to their level. For a brief second I questioned myself. Was I the villain now? But then I'd see their laughter replay in my head, their smug faces denying what everyone knew was true. And I remembered, no, I was just surviving in a war I didn't start. Eventually the HOA got dragged into the mess again. Nancy and Barbara filed formal complaints against me, said my mailbox was weaponized, said my security cameras were harassment. Fine. I showed up at the HOA meeting with a folder thicker than a phone book. Time-stamped videos, screenshots, written statements from neighbors, even a spreadsheet cataloging every incident. When the board saw the evidence, the room went silent. The president of the HOA took off his glasses and said, "This is extensive." Nancy tried to scream that I was framing them. Barbara whined that it was all harassment. I kept my voice calm. "This is documentation." The board deliberated, then hit them with heavy fines, $500 a week until the harassment stopped, plus threats of legal action if it continued. Barbara burst into tears. Nancy shouted, "This entire HOA is a joke. You're all siding with a maniac." The president leaned forward and said, "No, we're siding with sanity." That was the moment everything cracked. Neighbors who had stayed quiet suddenly stepped up. Stories poured out, kids bribed to egg houses, gardens, destroyed old women yelled at for trimming bushes too loudly. The twins weren't just my problem anymore, they were everyone's. Code enforcement showed up days later and cited them for an illegal fire pit, overgrown weeds, even a rotting mattress in their backyard. Their broken SUV got towed when the HOA fined them again. Watching the Queen barge hauled away felt like poetry. Their GoFundMe to raise $10,000 barely scraped in $12, 6 of which were anonymous donations labeled, "Maybe don't hit mailboxes." The final blow came when Nancy's employer saw the viral video. A customer service supervisor for an insurance company caught trashing someone's property. The irony was brutal. She was suspended indefinitely. Barbara kept pacing her porch sometimes, throwing donuts at my lawn, sometimes just glaring at me through the blinds. But their power was gone. They were beaten, stripped of every weapon in their petty arsenal. And me. For the first time in months, my mornings were quiet again. The breeze, the chirp of birds, the hum of sprinklers, no engines revving, no perfume clouds, no laughter that felt like a knife. I touched the cold steel of my mailbox, still standing, still solid, and knew the war was over, at least for now. Because when I glanced up, Barbara was watching me from across the street, her eyes calculating. People like her don't admit defeat. They retreat, they stew, they wait. But if she ever tries again, I won't just be ready. I'll be waiting. Sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to make them crash into their own arrogance.